thank you for joining me for this curious conversation. I'm delighted that you're up for this. And it's like 10 in the morning there.
It is, but it's afternoon there, correct?
Yeah, 4 o'clock here in Amsterdam, 3 o'clock for anyone. Oh, and that's Tea and Tangerine Maker. Anyone joining from the UK, 3 o'clock. So yeah, and how's your morning been so far?
Quite nice, actually. I got off on a nice morning exercise jaunt. I thought it was going to be more of a jog, but Atlanta weather, even though it's not terribly hot yet, it's very humid, so it makes breathing hard. So I just took the opportunity for a beautiful walk in the sunshine.
Oh, that sounds so nice. That sounds
Yeah.
lovely. So, you describe yourself as a visual activist, which I honestly I don't think there's a better way of summing that up. I mean, you are literally, well, you explain it. You'll explain it far better than I can.
Yeah, and actually, as you were introducing what you do and why you do it, I think that there is an absolute overlap in it, which is, I think, one of the things that brought us together as spirits in this world. It's about that connection and that conversation, and that kindred spirit kind of identification sort of thing. But um, when I think about visual activism and what it really is, the intent of it is about disruption, discord, and hopefully discourse. So just like you'd see a beautiful mural on the side of a building that is socially or politically charged, and it captures your eye and it captures your attention, and it makes you start thinking about something. As living human beings moving through this world, why can't we be that? And why can't we have the messages that are of import? And for me, those messages center around truth and authenticity and love and kindness of humanity, regardless of sexual orientation, gender identification, race, size, able-bodiedness, etc. It's that my visual activism, I thought, was actually initially very rooted in the LGBTQ space. Uh, Similar to, like, days of yore, times of yore, the old Christian fish, right? So somebody would put an arc in the sand, and then another person would see that, and they would put an arc in the opposite direction, and it made a fish. And it was the secret identification between Christians, a secret exchange. And similarly, for so long, folks in the who identify as LGBT or Q, and even those who are curious as well, have frequently feel very alone. And so just having those moments where you're walking down the street, you're looking through Instagram, you're in a shopping place, or you're in the office, in the office, and you see somebody who it triggers something in your mind about yourself, a truth in yourself. And I was doing, like, trying to be a safe space for the community. But what I realized is that the message is so much more global than that, and that's where I take so much great pride in realizing the intersectionality of it.
It's so powerful, and it's just such a wonderful thing to show, like you say, that why can't you, just in your choices of what you're wearing, of how you're presenting yourself to the world, you are no doubt provoking conversation, whether you're involved in it or not. No doubt making somebody recognize an aspect of themselves, see themselves. You're creating, as you say, a safe space. I just find it's just, I was so delighted when I found you on Instagram, and I have no idea. I was thinking this morning, like, how did I come across Mindy? Must have been some hashtag or something, but I just so remember finding your profile and being like, oh yes, everything, yes, 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 because it's exactly what I believe, that yeah, that we can be firstly our own works of art, but also there's so much power in self-expression, and that doesn't have to be verbal. So how
Absolutely.
did
And
you end up,
no, go on.
sorry, go on. I was
No,
going to say,
nope.
what's been your journey of, like, I mean, obviously bow ties is such, and the dapper look. What's been your journey of finding, did you have periods of time where you were playing with other styles, or was it always sort of what's considered traditionally menswear?
So interestingly, I would say my entire life has been a fashion experiment, sometimes of failed extent, and sometimes of a specific zeitgeist in time. So like even back in as soon as I was allowed to dress myself, the things that I would wear would always be considered some sort of outrageous. Um, it wasn't until I started, I was very blessed to have a family that valued education and supported us with love and with and regardless of what our finances really were, I never felt like I wanted for anything. But when I started being able to shop for myself, because when somebody shops for you, you have to acquiesce to what their mind's eye sees you in.
Yeah.
And when I started shopping for myself, I would find myself starting to, and this is back in my I guess like late teens, early 20s. I would find myself weaving my way over to like the men's sections of stores like the Gap, and in the back of my mind, I would be like ready with a story like, what if a salesperson comes over to me and it's like, oh, you're on the wrong side of the store. And so like I have a brother who is a year older than me and just a little bit taller than me. And so in the back of my head, I was picturing him and I was like, oh, if somebody comes to me, I will say, I'm shopping for Perry and he's looking for a pair of pants and he's similar sized as me. And so like I felt like I needed to be defensive about it, as opposed to now where when I walk in a store and somebody asks me if I know what side of the store I'm on, I say, yeah, do you? Um, uh, but we all have to take that journey, right?
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
uh, you don't know yourself from birth. Like in your early years, it is the environment around you that shapes you. It is the family within which you grow up. But when you get to start finding things for yourself, like that's that's the real spice of it. Just really in being able to listen to yourself and experiment and make mistakes and figure out what you can learn from them and grow.
Yeah, absolutely. And you must, I assume, have had now so many positive experiences that sort of empower and enforce your personal style choices. I would assume that the power of what you do is confirmed on a daily basis.
Yeah, and it's interesting. There was a period of time, and I would say that this was probably even within the last 5 to 10 years, where I would when I would head out of the house, um, I would be very sensitive to how people were perceiving me in the world, like how people were looking at me, and were they giving me the side eye. And then I got to this like this sort of I'm not going to call it a breaking point because people think breaking point is a negative thing, but something of that nature, where I was like, um, let them look at me out of the sides of their eyes. Let them. I'll take everything that they're giving me as a compliment, unless it's dangerous.
Yeah.
And I'll actually even accept compliments that aren't intended for me, just for fun. So like, we'll be walking down the street and, somebody next to me will be carrying an umbrella and somebody's like, nice umbrella. And I'm like, thanks. And it was obviously not intended for me because
Yeah,
I just,
yeah.
just for fun. But yeah, I do try to, both pay attention to and ignore some of the attention that I get, because it can be negative and it can be positive. There are parts of the US where when we drive, not now because there's not a lot of
Yeah.
mobility in the US in the moment, where my wife would not let me get out of the car to pump gas for fear of being harassed as either a gender nonconforming person or a lesbian. And So, there are certainly times where the attention is negative, but by and large, whether somebody immediately identifies me as queer or gender nonconforming, um, the first thing that they see is some sort of either this doesn't sit well with me, or this sits enormously well with me, and it provokes people to think differently. And maybe the scarf that they were double guessing whether or not they should wear out of the house, now they're like, if she can do that ridiculousness, I can do this scarf.
Yeah. Which, I mean, surely the world's just going to be so much more beautiful to look at if everyone is doing that. They're going for the thing that, and we've all done that, no matter in whatever, way and whatever objective. We've all got that thing in our wardrobe that we've put on so many times, and we're like, I'm going to wear it. And then when you come to walking out the front door, you go, no, I'm not. I don't have the space to deal with the attention, to deal with the energy, and it goes back in the wardrobe. But I think that's why, I think your style is fantastic, but I also just find your choices so inspiring, because they do speak to that aspect of, and I'm somebody who wears bow ties. I'm a straight white girl who wears bow ties, but yeah, it speaks to me that we all have that bit of self-expression that we would like to really just break out of what we feel society is packaging us as.
So one thing that I'm curious about with you, so I know a little bit about your background. I loved you did a post not too long ago where you share a little bit more of your journey to how you got to where you are today. And when I first started looking at your store, and I saw those all the beautiful rainbow collection, I was like, is that intentionally pride? And as I started exploring more, I realized that it was. So I'm curious, like, because there is no minority can achieve the equality and respect that they and we deserve in this world without having the open-mindedness and open-heartedness of allies who understand that we all have a lot of foundational similarities, and it is the things that are different about us that actually make this a more beautiful world. So I'm curious as to what drew you into being an ally.
God, that's a good question. But I think really, in answering that, I wouldn't have understood or even had that terminology ally until like a couple of years ago. It wasn't it, and I love that it's a powerful word, ally, but the reality is for me that it kind of also makes it feel a bit conscious and a bit and it's just I've been very lucky to know a huge not more I could do with more diversity, of course, but a diverse group of friends who are family, and many of them happen to be gay, and it's just that. And then when you get to know and love somebody properly, you become aware of their struggles and the fact that the world, sometimes some aspects of society do not let them be their brilliant, beautiful selves because they want them to conform. And so, yeah, but for that reason, I guess that's how I am, aware of the power of the flag, of the power of the rainbow, what the rainbow represents. But I mean, I used to say, and I think many of my friends would attest, there is also inside me, there is somewhat of a gay man. The Judy Garland loving, Betty Davis worshipping, like I've just always had a lot of things in common, and therefore been drawn mainly, I guess, to gay men. But I mean, one of my very best friends, godparent to my daughter, her pronouns are she, but she is gender non-conforming. I don't know, it's never been something conscious. It's just I have a similarity with the tribe, if you know what I mean. Like there's Yeah, I'm probably fumbling over this because I don't know how to explain
No,
this.
no, and that's the thing. Like, if you had a pat answer, I would question you. But the fact that you're speaking from your heart, that's the thing that I absolutely appreciate. And I think that as I was listening to you speak, I was realizing, and I guess not realizing, but I was making the connections with the conversations around anti-racism,
Mm,
um, because it wasn't too long ago where folks were comfortable enough in saying, "Well, I'm not a racist."
yeah,
Um, and first of all, one can hope that they are not racist. One can believe that they are not racist, but as you start exploring within yourself and realize how, all of these things that society has stacked up, that have like planted seeds in your brain and sprouted, we all have aspects in ourselves that we need to challenge and question because they were planted at a time when we weren't ready to respond to them. And
yeah,
so the concept of anti-racism versus not being racist is that intent that you were talking about, and the awareness around it with allyhood. And it's not standing for somebody who is doing or saying or acting in an anti-racist way. It's speaking up when nobody's looking, speaking up when everybody's looking, and also taking the time to listen and to read
mm,
and to educate yourself so that you can continue to grow and evolve within yourself.
yeah,
So
absolutely. And it's been
you
such
really
an
spoke to me there.
interesting it's been such an interesting journey. I can certainly say for myself, and I'm sure for many other people, of like exactly what you say, that prior to the unfortunate, yet again another death that caused the Black Lives Matter movement to sort of hit the mainstream more, get have a resurgence. I don't know the right terminology, but up until that point, yes, I would have said, well, I'm not racist, and yet I've been questioning myself as I've been partaking in my own anti-racist education, um, realizing that I would and have been in situations where I will speak up against homophobia before I would speak up against racism, and asking myself, why is that? Why? And I don't know whether it's because is racism something that permeates more in a society that I move in because of my bubble, my world, that I'm not as exposed to, or as a bystander not as exposed to homophobia. And so when it comes, it's a real, it's a easier thing to stamp out and deal with, and or is it that it's just so societally more accepted to um to push back against it than it is about racism, because it's so more, it can be so subtle. And I don't know, maybe you would be far better placed to answer that, whether what brings more microaggressions. I wouldn't know.
Yeah, and I think it's really about what your what your exposure is, right? Like I live in Atlanta, Georgia, which is the cradle of the civil rights movement in the United States. Martin Luther King Jr., like it's hard to go very far without seeing his name on a building or on a street, and without having awareness of the beautiful people who have really taken wings in this community and continue to, in 2020, seeing some like Killer Mike, Michael Render of, why am I losing the name of his, just, he's also a musician and an activist and just a brilliantly hearted human being, an entrepreneur. And to see him out there on the front lines trying to tell everybody, wear your masks, be safe, and don't burn your house down. We need to plot and strategize and consider what our next steps are as we move forward together. And I think it really does depend greatly on the environment, because the U.S., we're a country that was founded in thievery, like we took this land from folks who lived here. We were like, hey, we like this place. We landed here, so this is ours now. And then we started really becoming a financially successful country based upon the back of slavery.
Yeah.
Bringing people in this country and saying that we own them, and having them be free labor in the fields and treating them subhuman. And that's the history of the country in which I live. That's not the, we have different histories no matter where we are. And, I'm sure you have a very interesting story because you, I believe you originated in the UK and now you're over
Yeah.
in Amsterdam. So just
Yeah.
having those different cultures and the exposure of each of them, I'm sure that's got to, certainly impact how you feel about the general census of equality and aggression, of microaggression and disenfranchisement of different communities.
Yeah, I mean, I'm totally the first to acknowledge my own privilege that all of, other than being a woman, and women, no matter how you identify, we all experience our own microaggressions for sure. But being a white woman, a white straight woman, there's many, many, many like realms of microaggression that I am either a bystander to, as in I'm a bystander to, and either conscious, like aware of them, listening and paying attention, or I have the privilege to not, to not be aware, it not resonating. So yeah, my experience is definitely, I mean, right now I think, I'm definitely learned. My time is to listen and learn and yeah, try and do better. And particularly again as a mother, like, I take that very, very seriously. I have a 19-month-old, and I take that very seriously, that I want her to be I want her to be an active, proactive, helpful member of society, not not somebody who, yeah, who can live in their own different bubble,
Yeah,
So yeah.
that's great because I have a dear friend of mine who used to work with me, and Emily and I just were instant friends, love her to the ends of the earth. Um, uh, it used to be that for Halloween we would bring the parents would bring their kids into work for trick or treat, and of like there was certain floors where it was like a haunted house. It was fantastic. But I got to meet so many wonderful kids from their parents, and Emily brought in her daughter Mavis, and Mavis and I, like the second we met, we knew that we were both unicorns in this world.
Oh,
Only I was an older unicorn. But we've always like treated each other with that same sort of like, kid play and like adoration. And it's absolutely a mutual adoration. And so, and in fact, one Halloween, Mavis came dressed as me in a bow tie, and it was the
oh,
most
that's
precious thing.
amazing.
Like, there's not a better gift that one can get than that. But I asked Emily the other day, and I said, "What are you doing to encourage Mavis to be an anti-racist in this world and to practice anti-racism?" And I could tell in her immediate reaction that she took it as she felt defensive about it, and like I was trying to question her, but I was just trying to get her to think in that direction and kind of step back from it to let her know that like I wasn't challenging her. I know that that Emily is wonderfully beautiful in what she exposes Mavis to, and how she brings her up in this world. But I was wondering if there were specific things that she was doing that I can help to share with other parents that I knew. And so I could tell that it weighed on her. And within 72 hours, I saw on Instagram a post of her husband, and Mavis at a Black Lives Matter protest. And Mavis had
Amazing.
clearly drawn her own sign. And I was just like,
Yeah.
This is what the future has in store.
And that's what we need, right? We need to see that hope, because we do, unfairly or not, we have a lot of hope pinned on the next generation, and a lot of necessity. You know, there's quite a hangover that we have inherited and we're handing over, of whether that's the environment, or whether that's equality, or whether that's, you know, finding the ability to meet somebody that you have a difference with and hear each other, and not simply stay in these separate camps. Yeah, there's a lot, unfortunately, but we're going to have to take that very seriously in how we are bringing up the next generation. We have to.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, you know, I turned 50 last August, and
you look great.
thank you. And as I started thinking about, like, I joked my entire 49th year. I joked to everybody that I'm not turning 50. I'm turning. I'm two 25-year-olds. And a really great friend of mine and an amazingly talented photographer sat down with me a month before my birthday, and he took photos of me. And after he took them, we sat down with them, and he started sharing them with me. And the detail and quality of what he did was so profound. And I literally had to sit the entire weekend with these photos and to look at myself and see, like, the lines here, and to see, like, you know, some of the things that are changing on my face. And find the beauty in those. And it takes time. Like, you can't immediately sit with that and be like, hey, yes, I've got this, I love it.
Because we're conditioned by society. Youth is held up as this be all and end all. There's no example there.
Yeah, this means either I was squinting at the sun, or maybe it was from smiling, or maybe it was just from being like, what the hell is going on here? But no matter what it is, I came about it honestly, right? And so you know, every scar that you have on your body, you came by it honestly, and you need to figure out what story it tells. And so I just wear these things, like, you know, like my scars that tell the stories of my life. And it made me realize that I'm as much a participant in the conversation as I am an elder statesman in the conversation. And the things that I've lived through in my lifetime aren't just my story. It's a history. Like, I never thought that when I was a kid, that when I came out at 21 years old, you know, and I really had to, like, sit with myself and think about things and realize what I was giving up and what I had to gain. And one of the things that I knew that I was giving up, and this was back in the late 80s, early 90s, was I wasn't gonna be able to get married. And the idea of having a child would be much more challenging for me. And so you know, I had to ideate, like, what does marriage look like for me? Because this is a right that I am denied. And is that something that I can exist within? And so you live your life differently when you don't have those laws that give you those permissions, and you don't realize it at the time until you get that right. And in 2015, when I officially got to remove the quotation marks when I talked about my wife, I'd be like, because we got married in 2008. I didn't realize how much I had compromised in order to feel like I was living my best and most glorious life. And so those are the reasons why I keep on pressing forward, and realize that one of the best things I can do is to plant the seeds in other people to make that difference in the world. I'm not going to stop, but I can't do it by myself. We gotta all do this together.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you're planting seeds by starting conversation in many ways, and you have a lot of
and uncomfortable conversations too, and not always with, you know, I can easily stand in front of the Human Rights Campaign and speak about visual activism and queer community and gender nonconformity and such. Um, and if invited, I absolutely would. But I think that there's a lot of power in, just stepping into the mainstream and engaging in sometimes uncomfortable dialogue, and but always important dialogue with folks who aren't necessarily immediately like-minded and like-hearted as you. And you can't go in with the idea that you're going to change somebody's beliefs, but you can try to move somebody's heart a little bit.
Or at least humanize. I think that that's the big thing. It's like there's so many times these subjects and the parts of society that are othered, by the lack of laws, by the lack of rights, they become dehumanized just in the way they're talked about. But I mean, kind of going back to, in answer to your question for me about being an ally, like it was about when you know people and they just happen to be they identify this way or that way, or I think it's a really important thing to stand. It's a courageous thing though, to stand in front of people who are not necessarily all going to be welcoming you with open arms.
And it's also interesting because, like, sometimes people feel like because you're sitting at the table and you are somebody who is quote unquote diverse, which a human being is not in and of themselves diverse. It is the place in which you put them that really is the diversity, right?
Absolutely,
In my house, there's not a lot of diversity of who I am. Like we're a queer house.
Yeah.
So you came in here, you would add diversity.
Yeah.
But people assume that just because they have somebody who is of color, of size, of differing gender, of etc., that everything will all of a sudden be better. But it's not the diversity that drives that forward momentum. It's the inclusion and the belonging. And so if I sat at the table and something was said that I knew was not in line with, like, it didn't resonate with me, and I know that it's not going to resonate with the community, or it's going to, or maybe it's something that is racist or whatever. If I sit there and don't speak up, what happens is they realize that the queer person at the table approved of this idea and the fact that she didn't speak up.
Yeah.
And so it's important that if you have a seat at the table, that you use that seat responsibly, and that you are a strong spokesperson for yourself, for your community, and for the greater good. Because at the end of the day, if everything was done just with the queer community in mind, that's not great for everybody. But you need to figure the entire puzzle. Like, so what is going to be something that is going to be thoughtful of you and respectful of how you live your life, as well as of me and other folks who are othered in this world.
Yeah, absolutely. There is also, though, I would say that going back to your seat at the table, that there's a responsibility on everyone else as well around the table to make sure that you don't simply have a seat, you have a supported voice. So if you do speak up, there is space made for that voice, and there are ears willing to listen and hear that without taking it as an attack on their own morality or values.
Yeah, and I think a lot about, like, all of the buzzwords that are happening right now, like the concept of the cancel culture. And I'm of two minds about the concept of cancel culture, because while I can't vote for who is the CEO of a corporation, if a corporation is doing something that is oppressive to me or to humanity, one thing that I can do instead of voting is not spending my money there and spending my money elsewhere. And maybe it doesn't have this great impact, but at least it makes me feel like I'm living my values, right?
Yeah.
But I also think that when you see a situation that's problematic, you can either say, I'm gone, or you can decide to stay and figure out how you can impact change. And that's the person that I've always been, where, a couple of jobs ago, I worked in the automotive industry. I was an e-commerce product manager at Asbury Automotive Group, which was at the time like the second or third largest automotive group in the country. And it's a very conservative culture. It was very white, very not anti-racist. I was the Jewish, I was the gay, and
Right.
one of the more educated people at the company as well. And so where I thought that the things that I was going to do that were going to be making a difference would be helping them to make smarter business decisions and all the rest of this sort of thing by way of like, here are the numbers, here's what's up. I realized that probably the biggest impact that I had was opening their eyes and realizing that some of the things that they were steeped in believing are no longer the way of the world and can evolve. And
Yeah.
I was only there for a year, and so I will share this hilarious anecdote. So for our holiday party, they didn't call it a holiday party; they called it a Christmas party, which is, I would say, pretty standard. And I think that most people disrespectfully pass that off and don't even consider it a microaggression, but it absolutely is. So they had their annual Christmas party at a country club, and one of the contests that they were going to have was a best holiday dressed costume, and it was a gendered competition. So there's a best holiday dressed man and best holiday dressed woman, and so I came to the party dressed to the casual observer. I looked like I was wearing a black tuxedo with a black shirt and a black tie. And so
nice.
when they were like, all right, so who's participating in the contest for best holiday dressed woman, and I stood up, and the people that stood up, like one was dressed like literally head to toe like an elf. There was somebody like, ugly Christmas sweaters, dancing hats, like all the things that you would expect. I mean, like it was to the nines. It was brilliant. It was hilarious, and I loved it. I appreciated their thoughtful originality. And when I stood up, at first they were like, it's not just about being best dressed. I'm like, wait for it. And so they went down the line, and there were I think there were 10 of us, and they gave us a mic, and we got to explain why we should have won best holiday dress, best Christmas dress. And the microphone, like, I'm wearing this hat and blah, blah, blah. And I'm wearing this, I'm an elf. Hey, Christmas, hey. And they give me the mic and I say, hey, by day, I'm Mindy Friedman, e-commerce product manager for Asbury Automotive Group. But by night, and I took off my bow tie, and I was wearing a black snap shirt, and I ripped open the snap shirt, and I was wearing a blue t-shirt with it looked like a Superman logo, but it was a Jewish star. And I said, by night, I'm super Jew, able to skin a dreidel with just the snap of a finger, able to make one night of oil last 8 days a night. I'm super Jew. And for a quarter of a second, there was nothing. There was dead silence. And I even saw some people looking over at our chief HR officer. And then all of a sudden it started. And there were claps and there were laughs. And I have never heard such loud noise. Like the staff was coming in to make sure everything was okay. And that reaction was so validating to me that it made people really stop and think, right?
Yeah, and realize how fixed in their own perspective they were.
And the best part about it was the person who was deciding who the top three that would be later judged by the crowd, like to clap for who they think should win. As he was narrowing down the top three, he would look at you and he would be like, you step forward. And he looked at me, Ed McGinty, looked me up and down and was like, no. And he walked over to the next person. He got booed. He got booed so loudly that they made me be a part of they changed it from top three to top four. And then I ended up winning the contest overall,
amazing.
Which was so that was better than any project that I launched at that company, any dollar that I helped them make, any other thing like that. To me, like that that was transformational.
Yeah, absolutely. What gave you the confidence? What in your life, like what has given you, do you credit with the confidence to do these things, to stand up and be visible?
You know, I have to say, I give a lot of credit to who I am as a human being, 100% to my parents. Like there are always people along the way that inform your journey, and things that you read, and teachers and educators that really help to like bolster it. But like my parents were always very kind-hearted, loving, very rooted in education. We had you know, I grew up in a medium-sized, you know, two older brothers, Jewish family on Long Island, and a very boisterous household. And I was the baby girl. I was daddy's little girl. And in order to have a certain amount of time of attention at the dinner table, because we all got together for dinner every night, you had to either be the loudest or the funniest. And so in order to do either of them, you have to have an idea as to what you want to say and what you want to do and how you want to be. And to have that unconditional love and support, and also the heckling, because they'll heckle you if you say or do something that they don't agree with, but to be able to speak up for yourself, even if it was a controversial choice, it helps to formulate your thoughts and feelings a little bit more effectively. So I would definitely say it all originates with my parents, and the values that they really instilled in us of and also being Jewish, growing up Jewish, and being a relative minority in my school, really taught me about ignorance and hate in other people, and how to rise above it, and when to speak up, and how to speak up, and where to find allies. And that is also what helped to unlock in my heart that feeling of allyhood with other disenfranchised groups. My first allyhood was with Black people, in realizing the parallels of the struggles between the Jewish community and specifically Black Americans. And the history of slavery and oppression and disenfranchisement, and continuing to be targeted and scapegoated. And as I become more aware and have different communities presented to me, and realize the other struggles that people have, it continues to open your mind and your heart if you want to keep evolving as a human being, and I do.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the only thing I think about in terms of my daughter, that you know, the struggles I had growing up, for example, there is no way that, you know, I will do everything above and beyond to make sure she doesn't have the same struggles. And yet, like you say, sometimes those struggles are, you know, the defining. They really help you be a more empathetic and more of an ally, and just more aware and conscious, I think. And I sometimes wonder, like, if you don't have struggles, can you still be an empathetic person? Which I hope you can.
Hold on, I think we're frozen. Hold on, we froze. Okay, sorry, we froze for just a moment, but we're back. I love the idea of you bringing a human being up in this world. And, you know, because I think about, like, and I'm sure you as well, like when you think about your childhood and you think about the books that were read to you and the movies that you grew up around and were annual traditions or whatever, you know, I think about a lot of the fairy tales I was told, and they're all like, you know, the woman waiting for the man to come along on the white horse and save her, and blah, blah, blah. And there are a lot of movies now that break that paradigm, and there are a lot of children's books like this. I remember about a decade ago, I found this book called Princess Smarty Pants, and it's a great book about this non-traditional princess who doesn't feel like she wants to be rescued by some dude on a horse, and her journeys and her adventures, and it's when you see things like that in this world, and you meet people like you are living those dreams, like those are those are things that keep you charged.
Yeah, that's I'll have to look that book up for Edie for sure. I've just seen we have a massive comment here. I'm just going to have a look at it. It's from
Yeah.
Andy, who's saying admitting one's own privilege, misunderstanding, and lack of education on all aspects of discrimination is so important in how we move forward together. Yeah, it totally is. And I think that a lot of us are really having, I can only speak for myself, but certainly I've had that lesson in the last few weeks, like really engaging with what white privilege is, really engaging with all aspects of my personal privilege. It's yeah, we can't seem to go forward without knowing that, right? We can't without acknowledging it. And
Yeah.
Ben, I see, is also, sorry.
Yeah. No, go on.
No, go on, but to the point, yeah.
I did see Ben's comment, and it really touched me.
I think that was
Yeah.
about the lines, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, oh goodness. Let's keep on talking because like I remember
yeah. That was something we were talking about white privilege or at least your privileges, at least acknowledging them,
yeah,
and then
yeah. So one of the things that I think is you know, and it kind of is a rift from cancel culture, is that I think that so many people are afraid to speak up because they're afraid of making a mistake. And
especially now, I think, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You know, I'm filming you. I don't know that there's really very many days in my life where I can say I haven't made a mistake. And I would prefer to make a mistake. I would rather act and make a mistake and be corrected so that I can evolve and become a more informed and better human being, than not to have said or done that thing in the first place. So like I posted something in my Insta stories and somebody responded to it and said that it was very ableist. And I thought about what I posted and I'm like, yeah, that was really ableist and I can't feel good about that. And I ended up taking it down and I apologized to the person. But the post itself actually provoked people and made them think for that moment. But it wasn't respectful to the larger, humanity. And so I want to make sure that what I do is with thought and intent, and that I'm open to making mistakes. But sometimes I'll even let that mistake sit because I think that it's also important to have those conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of the cancel culture, for me, they are to me they're two parallel things. So the cancel culture and like let's take being an anti-racist, for example, and the fear of saying something wrong. I keep thinking about not only do we have to learn and to sort of step, is this okay? And can I open myself up to hear these voices so that I can be educated? And because we're not going to do this entirely on our own, with books and podcasts. Some of this has to be conversation and speaking to people about their own real world experience, their own personal experience. But if we continue this world trend of shaming, of cancelling, we are also firstly just stopping conversations, stopping anyone from progressing and evolving, but also there's a bigger lesson there that we're teaching the next generation about what that is to get anything wrong. To make any mistake is just the worst thing in the world, and the stakes could not be higher, whether that's offending or upsetting somebody or asking a question in a classroom, or we have to show that questions and curiosity and being corrected, it's not the worst thing. It's fine. It's part of the journey.
If I wouldn't have learned how to walk, if I was constantly afraid of making a mistake. My dad sent he's been in a very nostalgic place, and so he sent a couple of weeks ago an old home movie, and it was done on like a Super 8 film, so like there's no sound, and it's terrible quality and everything, but like there's several different clips of me walking, and I'm like, probably, I don't know how old are you when you walk, like 2-ish?
Around,
Um,
well, to 12 to 14, 15 months, I think. Yeah.
I was advanced. Let's say I was 6 months. No, I wasn't advanced. So I'm walking and I'm like, I'm just looking forward and I got a big old smile on my face, and every clip ends with me falling on my ass, but getting back up and then just doing the same thing over again and just keeping on plodding on, and it just to me was such a great metaphor for life.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And how much you learn from falling down and getting back up. I'm just having a look at some of the other comments here because I'm conscious that we're it's whizzing by the time, and I know Instagram's going to cut us off soonish. So Ben also says, definitely, you're completely true about not going into a conversation expecting the other party to agree, but instead going in with the hope that the other party will at least listen. Yeah, that's definitely the place. These are the conversations we all need to have are definitely they're big. They're big conversations. They're not like one and done and great. Converted. That one's over this
Yeah.
side.
If your battle can be won via a tweet or a meme, then it's not a real battle.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
that, any real change, any meaningful change, um, is born of many seeds, and it's born of many paths, many branches. So there are some people that will be protesting in the street. There's some people that will be voting. There's some people that will be elected. There are some people that will be starting new businesses. There are certain people that will be working within those businesses to be a part of that change. So there are so many different ways that we have to consider what change looks like, and not shaming somebody for the fact that they're not out in the street because maybe they have a wife who is immunosuppressed, and to do so would introduce risk into this household that I'm not willing to take. But the things
Mm-hmm.
that I can do are, and I've been really gratified with on Instagram as and Facebook when I post about anti-racism, from my point of view, that the affirmation that I get from it, from across all the spectrum, and listening to it very sensitively to figure out the ways that I can continue to press forward in a more meaningful and impactful way. Just because what I say is gets a heart from somebody who happens to be Black, that doesn't mean that that my work here is done. It means, hey, you're on the right track. Let's keep going in this direction, and let's continue to listen to each other and to know each other's more full stories, so that we can support one another to live the most glorious lives.
Yeah.
In order for me to win, you don't have to lose. I just have to be
Yes,
my best.
absolutely. And how, as we are like, and I don't want to, take up too much more of your morning, but so that we can end this. I mean, I have to just say though that I really urge everyone to go follow Mindy on Instagram. It's Dapper Mindy, and also do check out your website's brilliant. Like your blog, I'm so glad that you're blogging again. So yeah, dappermindy.com. I've literally just been like reading through so many of them. There's so much that I'm just like, oh, this is so brilliant. But what is it that you're feeling hopeful about the most at the moment, do you think?
I I really do believe, and I, gosh, it's growing up Jewish, and I identify as agnostic right now in my life, and have for quite a long time. Um, the It is a culture of questioning, but it is also, there's this concept of kanahara, which is don't speak something into existence or the opposite will happen. Like if you're driving down the road and you're like, yes, no traffic, it's smooth sailing, I can't believe it, all you spoke into existence, now all of a sudden there's a huge traffic jam. So I'm going to say, regardless of what happens in November, and I do hope that enough people have their eyes open to what bad leadership and bad humanity can do to this world, and to do this country first, but to the world as well, because what happens here is, it ripples. Just, what happens anywhere ripples. And so I do believe that there is change brewing. I do believe that conversations are evolving. And so I do think that there is going to be meaningful evolution regarding race, regarding gender, regarding sexual orientation. I think these are things that have the support and the momentum. And if it's not going to be driven by the government, because we can't expect everything to be driven by quote unquote leaders when they won't quote unquote lead. It can be driven by organizations and corporations. Like, you know, there are a lot of big companies that have been around for many, many decades that realize that they've been a part of the problem too long, and now are dedicating themselves to figuring out how they can be a part of the solution. And so if it's not going to come from the government, it can come from the people. And I don't understand why the government doesn't truly represent the people, but regardless, the people, that's who we are, and we get to be that voice. V for Vendetta was a movie that really grabbed me at the time. That, you know, the government people shouldn't fear their government. The government should fear their people. And ultimately, I'd prefer that none of that fear exists, and that we just we can see each other all as individuals, human beings, and that we can have that feeling that, like, in order for me to succeed, that A, I should have the same opportunity as you. And B, like, I don't have to beat you to succeed. I just need to be my best me. And if your best you is better than me and you get that seat,
absolutely, yeah. No, I completely agree. I look forward to the time. I believe the time is happening where people are recognizing there's space for every one of us, and the people who maybe don't want to recognize that, they've taken up too much space for too long. So each to their own.
And they say that they're a dying breed, but I try not to do that because as somebody who just turned 50, I think that probably also includes me.
Oh no, I hope not. Thank you so much. This has been absolutely fantastic. It's whizzed by. Oh, we're getting a countdown already now. So I'm going to say thank you so much, and this will be saved to IGTV and also go on my YouTube. So I will be sending that out to you too. And lots and lots of love. Have a great day.
And I will share this far and wide. I really, really enjoyed talking with you, and I enjoyed getting to meet some of the folks who absolutely adore you already.
Oh, thank you. Goodbye.
Bye, Alice.